little interactive score screen here for the Scuttle game. Basically, it's a bunch of these objects managed by another object. Each of these is their own object that loads a sprite. So by default, they're all loading these sprites derived from this Photoshop file. So inside of Unity, if you go to the original Photoshop file, which I'm keeping under the resources folder, which is called score, and I go to sprite editor, notice that these are already cut into individual sprite pieces. I did that by going to select automatic and hitting slice. So this is really handy because I can come into Photoshop, make my adjustments to my text. For example, let's just do something simple like turn that red and save it in Photoshop, and then go back to Unity, and then notice that it updates my graphics just like that. If I had a change in the size of this stuff here, that's when I would go back into the individual file and then clicking sprite editor, and then you could readjust your slices this way. But anyway, moving right along, if you give it a score value, in this case we'll give it a value of 1, 2, 3. When it loads, essentially it'll take those and then knock off all the zeros that you don't need. Like so. Let me put that back to black here. Same thing applies if you have no score. It'll truncate that down to just like the default 0 value. Or if you have a negative score, which you shouldn't, it just handles that and puts it back to 0 again. And then the only other case is that I'm using an integer to keep the score. There is actually a max integer value there. It's 2.147 billion. No one's going to go that high, but in case they do, it'll handle that circumstance as well. But it's on myself just not to pass a value that large to it usually, but I have some handling for it in here. And then essentially the script has one object that manages all this stuff. It's called score object, which runs the score object script. And then in score object, basically, it looks for a few things. It's looking for a value for each of these numbers to go into. So I've created an object for each one and put it in this array here. And then for numbers, these are the individual sprites of these tiles. So like the number 0 gets dragged into element 0, 1, 2, 3, all these all the way down to 9 to represent all the numbers. So once all that's in place, the script, when it updates, basically I've got this function called update score, which objects will interact with this object by calling that, or I might do events, I don't know yet. Anyway, it's just mostly string conversion. I take the number, turn it into an array of characters, and then I do a little handling to make sure that it's not over or under a maximum value. And then this is a loop that does most of the work right there. And it's basically saying iterate through all of it for the length of the array of the numbers in the array. So that's the score. So if the score is 100, it basically says that's 3 numbers. So for those 3 numbers, loop through, turn on the value for each of these. So make sure that the object placeholder, in this case place 1, is enabled for the value of 9. And then basically turn them all on, set the number to it, and then the last function down here cleans up all the trailing zeros. And basically looks at it and says, if you don't need all the numbers, turn off the ones you don't need. Yeah, that's the gist of that script. And so this is going to go into probably the sign and the score screen of C Shell Scuttle sooner than later. That's my stand-up. The Glade breakfast now.